So over the last couple of days I've been doing my cutback. It took some doing, but finally there, got it all sorted. And this is what it looks like. I'm quite pleased with it. And the only downside is they're predicting some really bad weather in March, and one thing you should try and avoid doing is cutting back plants right before the cold weather, because it helps to protect the crown of the plant. But you know, it's something I've got to do. I've got to actually start this process, and if I don't start it now, I'll never get it done. If I have to start it in March, once that bad weather has gone through, then I'm going to really struggle. So I took the decision, we're going to do it. I think I've already shown a video on some of the grasses that I cut back, but I've now cut the perennials back as well. There's one or two that I have missed, little tiny ones, but I'm not too bothered about those. But everything's been cut back. Nothing left. I tend to take them down to little stubs, pretty much like that. There's actually more plants in there than that one. This is a eupatorium, and I've left that little stump so I know exactly what's there. Oh, so I know that there is something there, because I'm always digging plants back up by mistake, and I'm sure we all do that. I've also had the opportunity to move plants around. Now it is a good time to do it, but I would say wait a little bit longer. But when you're doing this process, you've got to make the decision: do I do it now or do I just wait? And if you wait, the plants can be away and out of control before you get back to them. So I'm doing a few now. Still got plants to put in. They're only small. They're in 9 centimetre pots, and I'm just going to wait to put those in. So I've had a jiggle around as well while I've been doing it. I've moved certain things out of the way. And had a rethink about certain areas. This is one area that I've decided to have a bit of a change in. And when you come down the driveway, you come to this section, and it's always annoyed me a little bit, because I think what it really needs is an archway joining up here and then coming across the path, just to make it look right. And maybe over time that's exactly what I'll do. But for now, I've decided that I'm going to put this tree in, and this is Betula fastigiata. It's called Joe's tree, or Joe Lep. How do these people call it? Joe's? Yeah, Joe's tree or Joe Lep. And I've got one up the garden. Probably just make it out of the tall, skinny one. Just about there. And this is another one, and they stay very small. They're described as a driveway tree, and that they are. So I'm having a bit of a mess around here at the moment, moving things around, and I've moved as we've cut the grasses back. This is a pennisetum. It's called Pennisetum macrorum, and what it has an annoying habit of doing is sending out little runners, but very early on, and you can usually spot them very quickly and control it and just cut it back into its clump, and that pretty much sorts it. It will do it again because I've moved it now, so it'll probably want to send out 1 or 2 more runners as spring hits, but I'll deal with that as we get to it. So what else can I say about it? So this is where we're at the moment, and I'm sure a lot of people are at this stage. I've cut everything back as I said I would, but one thing I did say was I was going to leave this miscanthus giganteus, which is tubularis, and I said what I'll do is I'll leave it like that. I'll take some out, which I've done. So I've cut about maybe half of those sticky things that you can see, which is the grass itself. And I'm going to show you what actually happens to this if you didn't want to cut it back. Now, I may get to the point where I will cut it. It is a bit of an experiment, but I know what it's going to do, and I'm hoping it will do it. But sometimes these things don't work how you hope they will. Now, what should happen on this, because I've already cut it back, and as you can see, I've taken out you can see the cut sections. I've taken out a few of them, and which, while we're here, you can see now there's a natural split there. So if I was going to split this again, I would take that bit off, and I would pot that up or put it somewhere else in the garden, or I would just leave it to keep forming a bigger and bigger clump. But what should happen is, as time goes on, here on these little nodes, these internodes, it's already trying to do it there, it should start sending out new leaves off of that, and it makes the whole plant look really interesting. If you don't want to see that and you're not bothered about that, then you simply chop it straight down to the ground, what, 6 inches, even as low as to the ground itself, the actual stalks. But I tend to leave them so I can see them, because it's so easy if you've got like a perennial to dig it up and not realise it was there. But this is an experiment, so we'll see what goes on. Hopefully it'll do what I said. It will send up new leaves as well. It won't just start those growing again, because there'll only be so many of them come off the nodes. There'll only be so many will produce it, and the ones that don't, I'll simply take them out as well. If I change my mind once it starts growing, there's nothing to stop me taking the whole thing down, cutting it straight down to the ground, because it'll still catch up. Now, evergreens, we've done the cutback, but you've got to remember, evergreens, this is where they pay off. So I told you I was trying to avoid doing this cutback right now and keeping it as late as I could. But evergreens really help keep the show going. And I've got a few evergreens around. We've moved this Euphorbia mercenites from the gravel garden area. It was getting too big. I've got several of these around now. All the seedlings are starting to show. And I like them to place themselves so I know where they're going to grow. So we've done all that. See, a lot of stuff down here, there's nothing really to cut back. The one thing I've decided as I've been doing the cutback is I think I'm going to move this cow drinker again. It's going to move. I'm always moving stuff, as you know. And I've been observing it for the last year and I've not been happy as I thought I was going to be with it. It does have hostas in it, and I've already removed a couple of them, and there's a couple in this section here, and I'm going to remove them and put them in a better area that'll suit more, and then move this into a better area again. Try and make it look good. So it's looking really nice. I mean, even now when you see, I've been sat down there at the seat having a cup of tea earlier, looking back at this, and it looks fantastic. I mean, even though it's been cut back, the thing is, I've got lots of evergreens. As you know, I've got the box edge. I've got new box edging as well, which I'm not going to show you. I'm going to do another video on the secret garden and the entrance to it a bit later. And I shall upload that one as well. It's all looking good. So features like that help as well, remember. They all help. Everything's cut back and it looks so different. As soon as you cut back, it's just a massive change. Kathy said it looks so different now, and it does. I mean, look at that. There's nothing to look at, really. This is why, as I said again, evergreens, like euphorbias, even the holly tree, all help to keep the show going. And things like this China clover. This is China clover rubra. I've got several of these around the garden, and they all help with keeping this show going. Now, you'd be forgiven thinking that that's a China clover, that's ornamental lessoniana. That's the pheasant tail grass, and they get to about 3 or 4 years old, and it's time to change them, pull them out, or find seedlings, replace them, or split them and get them going again. But once you get to about 5 years, you pretty much say goodbye to that, and you just rely on seedlings. So this area at the moment, I'm jigging about with this today, actually. Once I finish recording this, I'll carry on. I just wanted to do this video while I've got some nice sunshine to show you where I'm at with the cutback. As I said, we're getting some bad weather now. I try and leave it till mid-February at the very earliest when I do my cutbacks, and I am spot on time for doing it. But I've been told there's going to be some bad weather coming in, cold weather, but I don't believe it for a minute. We'll probably get really cold weather and a little bit of snow, but that'll be pretty much it, I should think. And hopefully the plants that I have cut back will be okay and it shouldn't affect them much. This great big rudbeckia, if you remember. There you go, down to a stump. Was looking great this morning. It's down to a stump. I've done it with all of them. You'll see the odd miscanthus. Now, if you've got miscanthus, don't worry too much at this time of year. It's not too late to, I mean, it's too early really to be dealing with them. You could leave those right up to the end of March if you wish to, because they're late season growers, so the warm season growers. So the leaf won't really start growing till then. Now I've nipped this back as well, so while I'm doing my cutback, I tend to have a look around. And I tend to like to go through once I've done this and fluff all the ground up, see what's going on, see what seedlings I can pull out. But I haven't done that yet. I'm leaving that because I've had so much work on doing this cutback today. It's took best part of 2 or 3 hours to do what I've done today, and I already did some yesterday and I did a little bit last week. But what I do while I'm doing that is I assess the trees. So this is a Betula Jacquemontii, the Himalayan birch, and we're getting to the point now, as you can see, where we can pull that off. We can start pulling bits and bobs off. It's getting mucky. If you've got one of these and it's bigger and it's got green all over it, get the scrubbing brush out and scrub it down with a bit of soapy water. It'll look great. But what I do, which is the point I'm coming to, is I tend to look at the tree now, and if you can see that, you can see I've cut some bits out the top. The reason I do that is because I don't want this tree to be a monster. As I've said before, Jacquemontii are very varietal and often grown from seeds, so you don't know what you're getting. You could get a tree that only makes it to, like my silver shadow, that only makes it, is grafted onto a rootstock. It only make it to something like 12 foot. And then you'll get the ones that make it up to 30 foot. And I've recently looked at one in a friend's garden and it's up to 30 foot. She never expected that. Neither did I, to be honest, but it's definitely grown from a seedling, a seed, and that's what they do to increase the stock. So I bought this, I know I'm waffling on at the minute, but I bought this silver birch some years back when we came up here, well, 2 or 3 years ago, and it was tiny. In fact, when I bought it, all the main stems were literally that big. They're now that big, so they're doing really well. But I don't want it to get to be a monster. Now, it looks a great shape. I think you'll agree that that looks a great shape now. That isn't just by coincidence. That's by pruning. And pruning is something you really need to get used to and get into. And at this time of the year, just before the sap starts rising, it is starting on some of the trees. You can tell with the swelling buds, but with birches, you must be very careful because you can bleed them to death. And by that, I mean, if you cut a major limb off of birch, it will look like it's raining from the tree. The sap will come running out. Birches are prone to it, and it has been known to kill birches if you do it too late and take too much off. So I've done mine now. It's looking good. I'm quite happy with that. And I've nipped off those top bits because what I don't want is a main leader to take over, because trees, they do that. They'll try and send up a new leader. And although it was bought as a multi-stemmed, when I first got it, it was trying to send up this leader here, the one with the cut stump there. That was the leader, or it pertained to be a leader, and off it went. So I nipped that back quite early, and as a result of cutting that back, it now produced this side shoot, which is less powerful, less likely to be the leader. Now, looking at it the other day, I noticed that this one is trying to now be a leader, and I decided to take the top out of that, which will induce further growth lower down and stop it growing as big. Hopefully that's what's going to happen. So that should be all right. So these are little things while I'm doing the cutback that I look for. The roses, we're not too late to cut back the roses. Good time to do it. To the end of March, I would say. I'd get away with it. Well, to be quite honest with you, I'll do it any time of year. It's all down to what you want to get from that rose that year. If, like me, you're trying to form some sort of a framework, yes, it's great to get the flowers coming at the same time, and it will do that. Probably not as many, but if you keep cutting it and form that framework pretty quick, you get better results quicker. And that's what I'm doing here. Of course, I'm bothered about the flowers, but it'll still produce lots of flowers. Now we've got this one here, which produced the lovely hips. They're pretty much going now. They're pretty much going, so we'll cut this back a little bit. It's new in, remember, and we'll encourage it to grow up this post here. We'll see where that goes. So the miscanthus are cut back again, as I showed you on the last video. The Deschamps are cut back. Everything's cut back. The one thing that isn't cut back yet, I'll show you in a second, are the plants at the back there. We'll go to those in a minute. But while we're here, we'll look at this. This is that elder, the sambucus, the black one, black tower. And I said to you that I would clip off a major limb, this one here. And if you notice, look at that. It's got loads and loads of new growth already. Those leaves are pushing out already, whereas in the younger growth, they're not as far on, which is what I would prefer, to be honest, because I know once this hard weather comes, a lot of these will suffer as a result if they're too far on. I mean, that end leaf there, that's last year's leaf. That, as are those up there, they're last year's leaves. They've stayed on, but they will get affected. So what I've said is I'm going to do some pruning, and I'm likely still to take this major limb off. If not today, by next weekend, that'll be off. I will produce new cuttings from this, some hardwood cuttings. They take relatively easy. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I get at least 8 cuttings off that. Take off the major limb, which encourages fresh new growth, and that's what it'll do. It'll be fresh new growth by the time it's finished, and it'll look a lot better as a result. If we allow the older ones, or the elder ones, to take over, it will become a bit of a gnarled, old, twisty thing that won't be producing many leaves eventually. So we reinvigorate these things all the time. I do that all the time. This is a cutting from that very shrub last year. Here's a tiny one starting again. I've got another one further over here. In fact, the better one is over here. I gave one away and I've got another one in a pot to put into the garden. Should I so wish. Here's the other one. This was the bigger one of the two. And that is there for a reason. So as I've said, now we've got the new French doors in, this area is going to get developed. And in the next 20 minutes or so, this will change. Not a great time, as I said, to start moving plants if we're expecting this cold weather, but it is a good time to do it as well. So I'm sort of contradicting myself. I've got this Eupatorium, which I think is Gateway. Both of them are coming out. All that's coming out, and it's going to be rejigged over there. That'll become apparent as I show you the next exciting little change I'm going to make. As I've said, I'm going to make a seating area here, or a raised deck. Where those 3 posts are, that's the length of it. Don't look very big on here, but it will be. That's something like 10 to 12 foot. It'll mimic the width of that bay window behind it. It'll come out to here. So it'll come out to here, it'll run back to the wall, and then it will have simple scaffolding boards along the top. And I'll probably do what I did on the deck. I will put some sort of safety barrier around it as well, because I do have a disabled daughter, and it would help her feel more confident if she actually steps onto it. That'd be safer for Sophie. Yeah, so that's going to look good. So this is the Cal Forster border, and as you can see, we've got the Allium Summer Drummer now showing itself better. There's quite a lot in there, and what I want to do is I want to extend this Cal Forster border by at least another foot or two here, is what I'm hoping to do anyway. But I quite fancy nipping away some of this border because I want to create a kind of a path running. This is the initial idea, and you know it could change. I would put a path running up there, and I've got to make something of this. There's several options I've got. I can make this a feature in its own rights, this whole thing, and just make a sort of a semicircle at the back there, and that would look good. Or I've got to remember that from the French doors there, it's the view from there we'll be seeing. So I've got to make it work from within there. And what we'll be seeing from within there is this section. So I've got to do something with that. I've got to bear that in mind. And there was a time when I considered putting this back to a path, making the path run through this section here. But as of yet, I'm not doing that. I'm going to kind of give it a bit more thought and do some work on it. So the thing that I'm quite confident about at the minute is by swapping those 2 plants over there and there, swap them over, pull out the Eupatorium, put it over here somewhere, put the Persicaria, which is polymorpha, the big one, into that sheep ring feeder. It'll look better. And I know that because I've lived with that polymorpha there for the last 2 years, and it does the same sort of floppy leaning, shall we say. Although it's very sturdy, it will help to contain it a little bit and make it look more interesting. And that should look good. So there we go. Everything's been trimmed back. The big cutback has finally happened. Don't know if you've done yours yet, but I've done mine. One thing I'll point out as well, this is a Rigeron Carvintianus, and it looks totally dead now. That's how they look now. Be very careful before you pull that out. They are short-lived perennials, but be very careful because that'll still probably have another couple of years of life in it. And what I tend to do is I will either grab that whole clump and clip it back into the central thing, or I'll just leave it alone till the first lot of growth comes. And as you can see, that's some new growth coming from within. New growth. So I could shave all that back and it will come back lovely. But I tend to leave them alone. And as you can see, the ones on the steps, oh, it's got all new growth deep within, ready to go. So sometimes I just leave them alone, don't bother with them. And other times I'll cut them back in. But now I know this bad weather's coming, I'll leave them alone. There you go. Enough said about that. The big cutback, it's been done. Well, let's hope this weather isn't too bad that they're talking about in March. I know we're only in February, but by March, there's talk of it coming in. Okay, I'll talk to you on the next one. Ta-da!